The biggest city in a country synonymous with football is bound to have plentiful stadiums. Sao Paulo certainly does, and they come in quite a wide variety of styles. So here are the stadiums and arenas of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Morumbi. Sao Paulo's namesake club plays at the biggest stadium in the city, and perhaps the most iconic stadium in the city, but it's far from being the best stadium in the city. It's pretty out of date. In fact, the triple-tiered design of unusual proportions has been kept pretty much the same since it opened back in the 60s. What has changed is that the capacity is being greatly reduced, but that's due to bucket seats replacing concrete terracing and wooden benches. Right by the Tietê River, we have Estadio Municipal Francisco Ribeiro Nogueira. Oh, and to any Brazilians watching, I know I'm messing up the pronunciations, but that's part of the fun. It's a very colourful three-sided stadium. Once again, it's not the most technologically advanced stadium, there's only a small section of chairback seats, and they happen to be the only covered seats. But it's still a solid venue in a somewhat tranquil setting. Neoquímica Arena was built from scratch prior to the 2014 World Cup. It's a controversial stadium for several reasons, mostly related to corruption. But putting that aside, the stadium's unique all-white design is quite striking. It's not a perfect design though. These roofs at either end are pretty much useless. The reason the roof is so high here is so that temporary stands could fit behind each end for the World Cup. They've since been removed, obviously. It's better than no roof at all, and it looks kinda cool. As does the stadium as a whole. Estadio Municipal Anacleto Campanal. I'm not sure this could be any more different from the clean design of the last one. This is a little ramshackle by comparison. That's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're wondering about this vacant patch here, well, that's due to the destruction of the building that held the press boxes that you see here. I can only assume that Israel got wind of some Al Jazeera reporters staying there. Estadio Alfredo Schurig. The name of this stadium has Portuguese, Italian and German all in one. It's like Switzerland. They speak Portuguese in Geneva, right? This stadium, also situated by the Tietê River, has an odd layout. Bit of a theme with the stadiums in this city. You have the main stand, which is the only one with a roof, then the three other sides are surrounded by a bent, multicolored, staple-like construction. Why is it crooked? We'll never know. Ginásio Walmir Marques. Brazilians love their football so much that even when indoors you can't stop them from playing. Although it did start out as a basketball arena, it has slowly become more of a futsal venue. A pretty impressive one at that. The continuous steep single tier of seating makes for an intimate atmosphere. And cool windows. It does still host plenty of basketball though, as you can see. Estadio Municipal José Liberati. The exterior looks a little rough around the edges to say the least, but once inside it's a little more aesthetically pleasing. I'd assume this stadium was originally just pure concrete terracing, and then they've added some seats, but only on every other step, so there's a sizable gap between each row, which means there's no shortage of leg room. You could even bring an extra pair of legs if you wanted. I don't see why not. Arena Barueri. Now this one is pretty cool. The exterior, consisting mostly of just concrete, is livened up with the splashes of blue and orange, a colour scheme that carries over to the interior which looks even better. The field is overlooked by a large tower in each corner, giving it the appearance that the stadium was meant to have a roof, and well, that is the case. They just haven't got around to building it yet. Other than that, I love that one big single tier at the northern end. Estadio Armando Salas Oliveira. I apologise to the stadium that I called a little rough around the edges earlier. That one was pristine compared to this one, which looks like it spent a millennium decaying in the Amazon jungle. Having said that, it still kinda looks cool. The way the one and only grandstand tapers down to nothing, and I mean 2 fields has to be better than 1, surely. I suppose I should also talk about the nearby velodrome, which seems completely abandoned. But once again, it looks freaking cool. I don't know, maybe you look at this place and see a rundown eyesore, but there's something about this aesthetic that I like. It has in the past been used for football, but obviously it's more of a cycling venue. Those are some pretty steep berms, come to think of it. Allianz Park, home to the Corinthians' arch-rival, was opened in 2014, yet it wasn't used as a host for the World Cup that same year. It wasn't entirely built from scratch. The northern end of the original stadium was kept and built upon, which is why it's the one and only curved stand. This also allows concerts to take place without damaging the turf. It is a great stadium, but one thing I would have gone for is some palm tree patterns on the seats, given that Palmeiras means palm trees. Pacaembu. This is a little bit of a change up from what we've seen so far. The facades of the stadium were built in the Art Deco style. It was after all built in 1940, which was not long after Art Deco's popularity peaked. The interior is also rather distinctive, particularly the southern end. Back in the day it was a very small stand, and I guess it just kept growing into this big ramp of seating. Coupled with a nice skyline backdrop makes for quite the sight. Arena Inamar. This city just keeps finding new ways to build a stadium in an unusual manner. 3 sides of the field have just regular stands, nothing unusual about them. But over on the eastern side of the ground there wasn't any room to build a proper stand, so they built a little stand on big stilts. Very interesting. Canindé. Have a guess what the name of that river is. Yes, it's the one I mentioned earlier. It mightn't look it, but this stadium was considered as a potential host for the 2014 World Cup. Well, a completely rebuilt version of the stadium. But alas, that wasn't the case, and this stadium remains a little run down. But still, it's an interesting venue for sure. USA? Geez, the University of South Alabama gets around. Right next door is Ginásio da Portuguesa. This arena has been home to numerous different sports over the years, but it's currently not used for any sports at all. It's occupied by a church and has been given the nickname Reborn Arena, which is kinda clever actually. You could even say that they've altered the name. Estadio Nicolau Alaion. This one is actually named after an Uruguayan footballer rather than a Brazilian, but he played many a match at this ground. It's kinda like how Napoli's stadium is named after Maradona, or how Liverpool's stadium is named after Anne Field, whoever she is. It is a very old stadium by Brazilian standards, but you know, it's kinda charming. Estadio Ícaro de Castro Melo. This one is named after a Brazilian but not a footballer. It's actually the architect that designed it. It seems like an okay stadium, however, as always, when there's a track, the seats are a long way back. The main stand is about 40 meters from the sidelines. Track and field has to have a home as well, I guess. Ginásio do Ibirapuera, built as part of the same project as the stadium. It has quite a vibrant exterior made up of these louvers, I guess you call them. On the inside, it's your old school arena seating layout that is rounded rather than rectangular. I don't know if they sell alcohol here, but I reckon that ceiling could be mistaken for a flying saucer if you've had one too many. Estadio Municipal Antonio Soares de Oliveira. This is one of the few lower tier grounds in the city that seems completely normal. It has very few quirks and is almost symmetrical. Although it's small, the steep elevated stands that surround the field would make for a pretty good atmosphere, especially when the two tenant clubs are playing each other. Estadio Baito. The stands on the northern side that follow the undulations of the slope that they sit on are painted with the stripes of a tiger, a nod to one of the clubs that plays here. It's unusual, but I love it. Who needs symmetry when you have character? That sounds like a pep talk to someone who's just had their nose broken. What I'm not such a fan of is the artificial turf field, but oh well. Estadio Bruno José Daniel. This stadium had to actually be closed for a few years back. But then they said, no way, Jose, let's get this stadium back in order. And they did, and now it's open. The smaller stand used to have an extensive roof. Not exactly sure why they had to get rid of it, but presumably structural issues. Estadio Municipal Pedro Benedetti. Long before the days of climate change awareness, this stadium was already being built in an eco-friendly manner. No need to chop down all those trees to make concrete and steel, when you can build an earthen stadium. It did take them around 15 years to build, but that wasn't due to structural issues, more bureaucracy related issues. Villa Belmiro. You'd be forgiven for assuming that this modest ground is home to a second or third tier club. But this is home to Santos, Pele's former club, and the city's fourth top tier club. We've been here for over 100 years. Despite the storied history, the ground is too small and is unable to be expanded, so they will be moving to a new stadium soon. Still, this place is pretty cool. The steep seating, particularly along the eastern side of the ground, puts the spectators right on top of the field. Estadio Municipal 1 and then a little thing, de Mayo. This ground is not named after the condiment, but Mayo is the month of May, and the 1st of May is Labor Day. It was initially built for use by the employees of a nearby clothing factory, but it didn't become a proper stadium until the proper football clubs moved in and that company went bust. Much like the other home of Sao Bernardo, the stands are done up in tiger stripes more or less. I'm not complaining, looks alright. Wait, did I say the 1st of May earlier? And those were the stadiums and arenas of Sao Paulo. I've got to say, although a lot of them weren't in the best condition, they were some of the most interesting out of all the cities I've been through so far. If you enjoy the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every 4 days and then, well, sometimes every 10 days or something. I don't know. Thanks for watching, have a good one.